Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive, into the science of good and evil. I think you're really going to like this one.
It's a good one.
It's really fascinating,
Yeah.
and I know that, all of you listening are interested in, where morality comes from, like the origins of it,
Yeah.
especially from kind of a scientific perspective.
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking at Dr. Michael Shermer's work, and his insights from his book by the same name. And hopefully by the end of this, you will have uncovered some really interesting perspectives on good and evil
For sure.
and grapple with some, thought-provoking questions. So are you ready?
Let's do it.
Dive in.
Let's dive in.
Okay.
So Shermer, he starts things off with a real head scratcher, like a classic philosophical problem, and it's called Euthyphro's dilemma. And the question is something good because God says it is, or does God say it's good because it already is good?
Whoa, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Big questions right off the bat. Yeah. And so he points out some of the problems with saying morality is, only based on divine command.
Right.
Like, for example, does that mean that all the, terrible acts throughout history were somehow approved by God?
Yeah. That's a slippery slope.
It is a slippery slope.
For sure.
And so as an alternative, he presents this idea of transcendent empiricism,
Okay.
which basically means that morality is woven into our very fabric as a species.
I like that woven into our fabric.
Yeah.
It's like we can't escape it.
Yeah.
It's part of us.
And it's through evolution.
Okay, so it's objective then, in a sense. It's not just a matter of personal opinion.
Exactly.
But it's also something we can, study scientifically.
Exactly. And he actually, to help explain this, he uses this comparison with the scientific method.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
You know how we use observation and evidence to, understand the world through science.
Right.
He's saying we can kind of apply that same approach to morality.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So if morality is part of, our evolutionary heritage, are there signs of it in other animals?
Oh.
Even if it's not as complex as, human morality.
That is a great question. I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
He dives into some really interesting examples of what we would call pre-moral behavior in animals.
Okay.
Things like dogs showing guilt, or vampire bats sharing food, or chimps, seemingly demonstrating fairness.
Well,
Makes you wonder what's going on in their mind.
I know that's wild. Those examples are so interesting.
Yeah.
And so he suggests that, those types of behaviors, particularly in primates, maybe where human morality kind of got its start. But then things took a really dramatic turn as human societies grew larger.
Right.
And organized religion emerged as this powerful force.
So religion essentially became the keeper of the moral code?
Yeah, if you think about it, religion with its rituals and hierarchies provided a way to kind of manage these larger, more complex societies.
Structure.
Rules. And ensure group survival.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah. And then he throws in this concept of the magic number 150.
Okay.
Which is this idea that humans can only maintain a certain number of meaningful relationships.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's based on research by Dunbar.
Okay.
And he suggests that this cognitive limit, might have shaped how moral codes developed as societies grew beyond that 150.
Yeah.
They needed, more formalized rules.
Yeah, you need more than just interpersonal relationships
Yeah.
to keep things running smoothly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then get this, he argues that even something as seemingly trivial as gossip played a vital role in reinforcing these moral norms.
Oh, wow.
Right? It was a way to keep tabs on who was trustworthy, who was stepping out of line.
Interesting.
And it helped to maintain social order. What do you think about that?
That's a really fascinating illustration of how deeply morality is connected to our social interactions. It's not just about these big abstract ideas.
Right.
It's about how we relate to each other on a daily basis.
Totally. And he doesn't shy away from the darker side of human nature either.
Right. We're not all sunshine and roses.
Yeah.
He reminds us that we are capable of profound good and terrible evil.
It's true. And he doesn't just tell us this.
Yeah.
He brings up those famous, almost infamous experiments.
Oh, you mean the Stanley Milgram experiment?
Yes.
Where everyday people were willing to inflict pain on others?
Just because someone in a lab coat told them to?
It's chillin'.
It's disturbing.
It really is.
And then there's the Stanford prison experiment.
Oh, yeah.
I remember learning about that in college.
The students playing guards.
Yeah.
They quickly turned abusive toward the students playing prisoners.
It's scary how quickly that can happen.
Yeah, it's a really powerful reminder that the potential for both good and evil resides within each of us.
Yeah, and it's much more complicated than just, labeling some people as purely evil.
Exactly.
It's so much more nuanced than that.
Right. It raises the question if we're not, like, inherently good or evil. Yeah.
What are the factors
Yeah.
that shape our moral compass?
Good question.
Yeah.
So, on that note, he really challenges this, like, romantic image of the noble savage.
Right. The idea that we're like
Yeah.
naturally good and peaceful.
Living in perfect harmony with nature.
Yeah, until civilization corrupts us.
Right, exactly. He's like,
That's
no,
the fast.
not so fast. He pulls evidence from, like, anthropology and archaeology,
Okay.
and it paints a very different picture.
Right.
Even though, like, pre-industrial societies are often idealized,
Yeah.
they weren't free from violence
Right.
or social inequalities.
It's like a wake-up call to see human nature
Yeah.
for what it really is.
Yeah, both our potential for cooperation
Yes.
and our capacity for destruction.
That's the duality of humanity.
It's true. And to explain this complexity, he introduces this idea of self-domestication.
Self-domestication.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
What do you think about that when you first encountered that idea?
Well, he builds on the work of Richard Wrangham, who
Uh-huh.
argues that humans went through this process of self-domestication over, like, generations.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating to think about.
So it's almost like selective breeding, but within our own species.
Right, like, just as breeders might favor less aggressive dogs,
Uh-huh.
early human societies may have unconsciously selected for less aggressive individuals.
And over time,
Yeah.
this led to, like, physical and behavioral changes.
Right, things like reduced aggression,
Yeah.
smaller skulls,
Mm-hmm.
increased social intelligence.
It's amazing to think that our very biology is, like, intertwined with our moral development.
Right, it's not just some abstract philosophical concept.
Right.
It's written into our DNA.
Yeah, so if we're capable of, such extremes, like, how do we navigate this complex landscape of
Right, yeah.
good and evil?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
I know he suggests moving beyond these ideas of, like, absolute or relative morality
Okay.
toward what he calls provisional ethics.
Provisional ethics. Yeah. How would you explain that to somebody who had never heard of that concept before?
So he argues that, absolute moral systems,
Which are often rooted in, like, religious doctrines?
right, tend to be too rigid.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, you have relative morality,
Yeah.
where anything goes depending on the situation.
Yeah.
And that's too flexible and potentially dangerous.
Too much gray area.
All right.
So where does that leave us?
So that's where provisional ethics comes in.
Okay.
It acknowledges that moral principles can be generally true,
Okay.
but they're also subject to context
Okay.
and new information.
So it's like a more nuanced approach.
Exactly.
It's like scientific claims.
Right.
We can hold strong beliefs,
Uh-huh.
but we have to be open to revising those beliefs as we gather more evidence and understanding.
I like that analogy. It's
Yeah.
a good way to think about it.
Now, before we go any further, let's just take a minute to review some of these, like, fascinating insights and kind of explore, what this all means for you in your everyday life.
Let's do it. It's really striking, this provisional ethics, it's kind of like the scientific method.
Oh, interesting.
Like he's saying we should approach, moral questions with the same rigor and open-mindedness
Yeah.
that scientists use,
I like that. Instead of clinging to these fixed rules,
Right.
we're constantly testing and refining our beliefs
Exactly.
as we learn and grow.
It acknowledges that, our understanding of the world is constantly evolving
Right.
and our place in it.
Yeah.
And to help us navigate this, kind of dynamic moral landscape,
Yeah.
he offers a set of guiding principles,
Okay.
almost like tools, in a moral toolbox.
I like that, a moral toolbox.
Yeah.
So tell me about these principles. What are we working with here?
He calls them the ask first principle, the
Okay.
happiness principle, and the liberty principle.
Okay, I
Yeah.
can see how those could be helpful.
Yeah.
So let's start with ask first. What does that entail?
It's deceptively simple,
Yeah. Okay.
but incredibly powerful before you act.
Mm-hmm.
Ask yourself, would the person affected by my action consent to it? Would they consider it right?
It's about taking other people's perspectives into account
Exactly.
before making a decision.
It's like that golden rule, do unto others.
Right.
But instead of assuming we know what's best for others,
Yeah.
we're actually checking in with them.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What about the happiness principle?
So this one,
Isn't that just about, like, being happy?
it is about happiness,
Okay.
but it's more nuanced than, just pursuing your own bliss.
Okay.
Shermer's happiness principle is about seeking happiness for yourself and others.
Okay.
But there's a crucial caveat.
What's that?
You should never pursue your happiness at the expense of someone else's.
Right, so it's not about self-sacrifice,
No.
but about, like, finding a balance where
Exactly.
everyone's well-being is considered.
It reminds me of the concept of like negative utilitarianism,
Oh, yeah.
where the focus is on minimizing suffering.
Rather than just maximizing happiness.
Yeah, like saying, let's at least make sure no one is being harmed
But yeah.
in our pursuit of happiness.
Have you ever encountered that idea before?
It's a fascinating philosophical concept.
Yeah.
And it aligns well with Shermer's emphasis, on considering the well-being of others.
For sure. And then, of course, there's the liberty principle.
Yes, this one centers around respecting individual freedom
Okay.
while ensuring that, your pursuit of liberty doesn't infringe upon the liberty of others.
It sounds like walking a tightrope.
It is a balancing act for sure.
How do we balance individual freedom with the needs of the collective?
It's something we grapple with constantly in society.
Think about debates on, like, free speech.
Oh, yeah.
We want to protect people's right to express themselves,
Right.
but we also want to prevent harm.
And hate speech.
It's a delicate dance.
It is. And that leads us to another question,
Yeah.
What about those really messy situations where these principles might clash?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Like, what happens when we face a moral dilemma
Right.
where there's no easy answer?
Yeah.
And even following these principles could lead to, like, conflicting outcomes.
That's where Shermer brings in what he calls the moderation principle,
Ah.
particularly when innocent people are at stake.
Okay.
He says, when innocent people die, extremism in the defense of anything is no virtue, and moderation in the protection of everything is no vice.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it's a pretty strong statement.
It really highlights the danger of clinging to, like, rigid ideologies,
Yeah.
especially in situations with really high stakes.
It's a reminder that nuance and compassion are crucial.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you think about that in the context of today's world, where things often feel so polarized?
Yeah, it's a timely and crucial message
Yeah.
in the midst of, strong opinions and heated debates.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that there's rarely a simple black and white answer, especially when people's lives are on the line.
Absolutely. But even with this provisional approach to ethics,
Right.
we still need accountability,
We do.
right? We can't just let anything slide because everything is provisional.
Exactly.
There have to be consequences for wrongdoing.
I agree, and Shermer addresses that directly.
Okay.
He argues that while there may not be some, ultimate cosmic judge waiting to punish or reward us,
Right.
there is individual culpability and
Yeah.
social justice within human communities.
So it's about creating a system where actions have consequences,
Right.
and we hold ourselves and each other accountable
Exactly.
for the choices we make. It sounds like we're creating a moral ecosystem,
Yeah, I like that.
so to speak, that promotes fairness and well-being for all.
I think that's a great way to put it.
What are your thoughts on this idea of provisional justice?
Well, it's a fascinating concept.
Yeah.
And I think it highlights the ongoing dynamic nature of our moral development.
Okay.
Remember, there's no evidence of an absolute moral authority. Yeah.
Dictating what's right and wrong.
So we're essentially taking responsibility
Yeah.
for creating a more just and compassionate world.
Based on the best available knowledge
Yeah.
and our evolving understanding of morality.
It's a daunting task,
It is.
but also incredibly empowering.
It is. It's both.
Yeah. What are your personal reflections on this idea of collaborative morality?
Well, it resonates deeply with me.
Okay.
Because it emphasizes that, we're not passive recipients of some preordained moral code.
Right.
We are active participants in shaping a better future,
I love that.
both individually and collectively.
And on that note, what did you think about Shermer's optimism about the future of humanity?
I thought it was refreshing,
Okay.
especially given all the challenges, we face in the world today.
Right.
He seems to believe that despite our capacity for evil,
Yeah.
we are making progress,
Okay.
toward expanding our moral circles and promoting tolerance,
He points to historical trends like the abolition of slavery,
the expansion of civil rights,
the growing recognition of LGBTQ plus rights.
as evidence of our moral evolution.
Right. It's not a straight line,
Right.
but the trend is there.
Yeah, it's inspiring to consider those milestones in our collective journey
It is.
toward a more just and equitable world.
And it's not just happening on this grand scale.
Right.
It's happening in our everyday lives, too.
Right. As we challenge prejudice, stand up for what's right, and choose compassion over indifference.
Exactly.
It's a powerful reminder that moral progress isn't some passive process.
No, it requires conscious effort,
Uh-huh.
both individually and collectively.
So we have a choice.
We do.
We can either succumb to cynicism and despair,
Right.
or we can choose to actively participate in shaping a more just and compassionate world.
It's about making choices,
Yeah.
big and small.
That reflect our values and contribute to a better future.
I love that.
Do you agree?
I absolutely agree.
And this brings us to a really crucial point.
Okay.
Even within this provisional ethical framework, there's still a need for accountability.
Yes, there is.
How do we address wrongdoing?
Right.
How do we ensure that justice is served?
That's a great question.
We can't just let anything slide in the name of provisional thinking.
Right.
It's about holding ourselves and others accountable for the choices we make.
Right. Precisely. And Shermer argues that while there may not be some, ultimate cosmic judge,
Right.
there is individual culpability
Yeah.
and social justice within human communities.
So it's like a checks and balances system for morality,
I like that.
where actions have consequences,
Uh-huh.
and we strive to create a system that promotes fairness and well-being for all.
Exactly.
What do you think about that?
Provisional ethics
Yeah.
leads to what Shermer calls provisional justice.
Mm,
It may not be perfect,
right.
but it's the best we can do,
Yeah.
within the framework of our shared humanity
Mm-hmm.
and our understanding of the world.
And remember, as we discussed earlier, there's no evidence for an absolute moral authority
Right.
dictating right and wrong.
We're all in this together.
So we're essentially taking responsibility
Yes.
for creating a more just and compassionate world.
Based on the best available evidence
Yeah.
and our evolving understanding of morality.
It's a daunting but also incredibly empowering realization, wouldn't you say?
It really is both.
It is.
Shermer emphasizes that morality, in this sense,
Yeah.
becomes a collaborative project.
I love that.
It's something we work towards together.
Yeah.
Constantly refining and adapting our understanding as
Yeah.
individuals and as a society.
And that brings us to what I find most inspiring about Shermer's book.
Okay.
His optimism about the future of humanity.
Yeah.
He argues that despite our capacity for evil,
Right.
we've made significant progress in expanding moral circles and promoting tolerance.
And he points to the importance of, individual actions
Yeah.
and political policies
Uh-huh.
that promote inclusivity and protect human rights.
It's a call to choose hope over despair, to believe in our capacity for growth and moral progress.
It's a powerful message.
It's like he's saying that the future of morality isn't predetermined.
Right.
It's something we actively shape
Through our choices, our actions.
through our commitment to creating a better world.
Absolutely.
There's a real sense of agency there.
There is.
Now, I know we've covered a lot of ground,
We have.
and I'm sure you, our deep-diving listener,
Yeah.
have some thoughts bubbling up.
Right.
What are some of the things that stand out to you so far? It's amazing to think about how much our understanding of morality has changed over time. Shermer points out that it's not just about these abstract ideas, it's reflected in real-world shifts.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
When you think about it, we've seen these, huge changes, like the
Mhm.
abolition of slavery, the fight for civil rights, the growing, recognition of LGBTQ plus rights.
Yeah.
These are like tangible signs of moral progress.
Yeah.
Even if the journey's not over.
And it's not just, happening on a grand societal level.
Right.
We see it every day.
Yeah, in our daily lives.
Like in those acts of kindness, when individuals challenge prejudice, choose compassion.
Yeah, those small moments.
It all adds up.
They really do.
I love that Shermer's book really emphasizes that we're not just passive bystanders
Right.
in this evolution of morality.
You have a role to play.
We have a responsibility to shape a better future. And I love that he doesn't shy away from that challenge.
It's a call to action,
It is.
He's reminding us that we can be better.
Yeah.
We can challenge our own biases
Yeah.
and work towards, a more just and compassionate world. And it's a choice
It's a choice we make every day.
every single day.
And that brings us to a question that he poses in the book that I found so thought-provoking.
Okay.
He asks, if you were truly free from any fear of judgment or punishment, would you still choose to be a good person?
It really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it?
It made me wonder, is my sense of right and wrong based on avoiding consequences?
Mm-hmm.
Or does it come from something deeper?
It's a question worth sitting with for a while.
Yeah, it challenges us to really examine the foundation of our own moral compass.
Where does it really come from?
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the science of good and evil.
I can't believe it.
I know it flew by.
Yeah.
We've explored, how morality has evolved.
How it's connected to our biology.
Yeah, how it's intertwined with our social structures and, how this provisional ethical framework can help us.
Yeah, it gives us some tools.
Yeah, give us some tools to navigate those complex moral dilemmas.
And I hope this deep dive has given, our listeners a new way to think about good and evil.
A new lens.
Yeah, and maybe even spark some questions of their own.
I know I've learned a lot, and I really appreciate Shermer's hopeful perspective.
Yeah, me too.
He acknowledges that there are challenges.
Yeah.
But ultimately, he believes in our capacity for moral growth and progress.
And, the exploration doesn't end here.
It never does.
We encourage you to keep questioning, keep learning.
Keep diving deep.
And keep striving to make those choices that contribute to a better world.
Until next time, keep diving deep.